think it's almost 7 o'clock, so we may call this meeting to order here. Yeah, my phone says 7 o'clock, so, and the clock on the wall even agrees. So let's call this meeting to order. This is the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission here at the City of Urbana. It is Tuesday, October 15th at 7 p.m., and we will start with a roll call.
Brandon Bowersox Johnson.
Present.
Carrie Brown Tess.
Here.
Michelle Guerra. Cynthia Hoyle.
Present.
Audrey Ishii.
Present.
Susan Jones. Amelia Neptune.
Here.
Nadine Schmitz.
Here.
Brad Bennett.
Here.
Michelle did mention to me that she was unable to come, so that's an excused absence. She said she couldn't come tonight. I haven't heard from Sue, but I bet she'll walk in, so I think that accounts for everybody. So we have a quorum. Let's proceed on. Tonight's agenda was distributed to folks. Does someone want to make a motion to approve the agenda as it was distributed so we can move ahead?
I'll make a motion.
Okay,
I'll
motion
second.
by Brad.
I'll second it.
Okay, seconded by Cynthia. All in favor of the agenda as it was distributed, please say aye.
Hi.
Anyone opposed? Okay, great. Then next is approval of the minutes. There were minutes distributed from our August 20th meeting, and I wondered if anybody had any corrections or a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any corrections or comments before we vote? Okay, all in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Great. Okay, thanks. Okay, then public input is next on our agenda regularly here, and I don't know if the person in the audience wants to come up and speak on any particular topic. No? Okay. I did hear from our commission member, Carrie, that you might have had some input that came in, so
Yes.
go right ahead.
I had an email from Josh Acree, and he said he commutes to work every day by bicycle, and there's a traffic light at church and university that does not acknowledge that a bike is waiting. Is this some?
It's in Champaign.
Oh, okay.
We could actually, if you want to, is he talking about?
Church, yeah, it says church and university. Does not acknowledge that a bike is waiting. If you could bring this up.
Maybe you can ask you for more information and give him the name of the staff in the planning department there. We can give you that.
Yeah.
I think it's Chris Sokolowski. Is it in the engineering?
That's true. Engineering probably
Yeah,
replaces in it.
I think he's involved with the traffic signals over there.
Yeah.
If you can get one of the location and you want to forward it to me, I can forward it on to Chris. So
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Or just send it to Scott and he can forward it on to me.
Yeah, either way.
Be telephone. By the time he gets to you, it's about a dog and.
That's right, that's right.
Something like
It will have totally changed. Okay, great. Well, that's great input. That's totally the stuff we want to hear and pass along, so thanks. Any other public input before we move on? Okay. Then we have 3 items of old business tonight, and the first is from Rebecca, an update on the bike master plan process.
So we are chugging along with that. We started back in June, and quite a few people on this commission are on the steering committee for the process. We had a meeting last month, and the Regional Planning Commission showed us some maps that they had created for their data collection that I thought I would share with you. I hope this looks better on your screen than it does on mine. It's very short and fat. Can you actually see this? Yeah. Okay. So this is these are on-street bike traffic counts. So this has been the map hasn't been updated, but this was actually created back in August. So the information has been updated. So I'll just run through what's different on here. So if you look at this, you can see the red dots. Those are areas that they took bike counts, but they needed to verify them, and all of those have been verified. There's one black dot that is on Florida and Broadway, and that the way that they count is like tubes going across the road, and so on locations where there is heavy traffic, car traffic, The tubes were coming out, so that failed, and they decided they were not going to redo that location because there are other locations they would rather focus on. And then in the yellow, those dots are potentially desired. So none of those have been done, but they are starting to work on those this week, and they are going to do as many of those locations as possible. And those potentially desired locations were identified through the steering committee and also just looking at the infrastructure that we have and wanting to count near and on our existing infrastructure. So those are the on-street counts. The next map here, these are side path bike counts. This was actually finalized in October, so this is recent. These are all city-owned side paths. So this does not include any side paths that are on university property, on the Park District property, on private property that maybe the public has access to. This is only actual city-owned infrastructure. And here we have, those are all final counts. So the largest dots, those are 51 to 80, the count on there. And you can see on South Philo Road, there's a 52. And then on Goodwin, there's a 59 and a 67. And then there's an 80 on Race, which is really quite high. That's the highest number on there.
7 on Springfield.
The 67 on, no, I think that's on Goodwin. That's just further south on Goodwin. Yeah.
87.
That's a 67.
67.
Yeah. So those counts are final. The
Rebecca,
next-
is there a way we can blow this up just a little bit?
Sorry?
Can you blow that up just a little bit?
Yes. Okay. Can you see there?
Yeah, that's much better. Thank you.
So here, over here on North Goodwin, can you see my pointer? Can't really see much on the screen. And then down here on Race, down here on Philo, those are the highest ones. And then we have 41 and 43 down there. There's a 42 down here. Those are 24-hour counts. Yeah. Yep. And they actually, normally when they test, they only do it Tuesday to Thursday. They try to not do Monday and Friday because they want regular traffic patterns. They also would normally pay attention to what time of the year, depending on school and not school. But they are just trying to get these in. So, for example, the counts that they're about to do, those potentially desired locations on the last map, they're doing those Monday to Friday full out because they know that they only have a couple more weeks that they can do them. They anticipate if the weather is nice enough, they might be able to, do it through to the end of the month, but it just depends on the weather. They don't do it. They definitely don't do it in the rain. The infrastructure, the tubes don't really work, and they don't even take car traffic counts on rainy days. So they didn't do any today.
Will it be possible to get the actual data so we can see, exactly what day and what time of day and how many?
I imagine at some
The
point,
breakdown.
yes.
Okay.
Now,
Yeah.
perhaps not.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
But at
Eventually.
some point.
Okay.
Okay, the next map, this too is finalized. This is not actually part of our plan, but this feeds into our plan. This is for the Urbana Park District Trails Plan, which RPC is also doing. So we're feeding on each other. We're able to have a lot of benefits that they're working on, two pieces of the same puzzle at the of different puzzles at the same time, but they're able to get more data and so on that we can use, and then the Park District Plan can use our data. So this actually does help us. These are Park District trails. Yes. And we can blow that up as well. So you can see, let's actually.
Oh, great.
So down there on Meadowbrook Park, so you can see down here 96 account and 75. So the 96 and the 75, those are actually on the streets, the paths on the streets, if I remember from our meeting correctly. And then the 51 and the 42, those were inside on the park's paths. And then here's an 18 over here in Southridge and a 9 through that park. 25 here in Crestview Park. And this is a very short path, but it's a connection in that neighborhood. Up here, we have a 30 off of Goodwin, 15 in King Park, and then in Crystal Lake, we have a 20 up here, 13, 11, and a 5. And then over here in Victory Park, a 16, a 13, an 11, and a 3, which seems like a lot to count in one small little area. So those also are all finalized. They're all verified and finalized. Okay, and then if we go on, this one is really quite out of date, but I thought it was useful to look at anyway. So these are the response locations from the Pedestrian and Bicycle Survey, the PABS survey, if you remember a couple of months back. So this was pretty early on in the process of them counting. The map actually doesn't have a date on it. But so on this map, those are the nearest intersections to where people lived. And this was when we had 410 responses. And we ended up with a total of complete surveys, 1,097. Those were the complete surveys. Then we had a couple of hundred partial surveys, so that the total number of complete and partial is 1,308. We had approximately 400 paper surveys, and 400 was the goal, so we either met it or exceeded it or nearly met the goal on paper. For the web surveys, we had 768 complete web surveys and 211 partial web surveys. So that's where someone filled out one or more pages, but not all 5. And I don't know if any of you are on neighborhood email listservs, but if you are, then you know that there was quite a bit of upset over the salary question that was on the last page. And so people were able to, their data was saved as long as they filled out the other pages, and then it just didn't save the data on that last page if they didn't fill out that question. So we did still get the data from those people, just not the demographic data, which was all, that whole page was demographics. So on the map, if we look a little bit closer, and again, this is when we had less than half of the total number of surveys, but you can see here, this is a relatively high-density neighborhood that people are bicycling and walking, and we know that. It's a lower-income neighborhood that bicycling and walking and public transit are often the only choices that people have in that neighborhood, and we were not getting a good response rate in there. It's hard to reach into that neighborhood. So we did attend a neighborhood event that it was a celebration of a community garden. It was a one-year celebration, and I went along with one of the RPC staff, and we set up a tent and table and gave out prizes if people filled out the survey. And so we did get, everyone, I'm pretty sure every single person that attended that event filled out a survey. And those are people we would never have gotten otherwise. And then RPC did the same thing in the North Urbana neighborhood, kind of up here. That one, they actually went to an event with the LRTP bus, and that was in Douglas Park, which is actually just across the border in Champaign. But you know, the whole neighborhood, they don't necessarily identify with, oh, I'm an Urbana resident, oh, I'm a Champaign resident. So they did get a lot of surveys filled out at that event as well. So we did reach into those neighborhoods. We didn't have a specific event for or way to reach the Hispanic neighborhood, but we will certainly incorporate public input. We'll find a way to reach that community throughout this process.
Do we have the survey in Spanish?
We did have the survey in Spanish. Okay. We did not have it online in Spanish. We did have paper copies in Spanish. And then this map is sorely outdated now, happy to say. So this is just the existing infrastructure map, and this was done I think back also in August, and we've had a lot going on since then. So the Regional Planning Commission will update this map. They're the ones that update it anyway. They update the GIS layer that the GIS consortium uses, and so they will be updating this, but they were just kind of waiting until everything was actually in and confirmed before doing it. So this will be updated, and we'll see a fantastic new map later, and I'm sure Brad will tell us about an update on where all of those bike routes and so on are. I know I drove up Broadway today, and those bike lanes are in. They look fantastic, look really nice. The street's so smooth and very exciting. So that's really all I have, other than you have all been invited to a meeting on October 22nd. I'm sorry, that's next Tuesday at 7 p.m. at the Civic Center. It is a bicycle planning workshop for elected and appointed officials, and I have an invitation here that I'll pass around to you. We have asked Ed Barsotti, the executive director of the League of Illinois Bicyclists, to come down and give us a presentation talking about bike planning. He did this back as part of the 2008 master planning process, and we thought a lot has changed since then. We have some new city council members, some new plan commission members, some new BPAC members, and so we thought it would be a good idea to have a similar kind of workshop that we did back then. So he'll be giving kind of a bicycle planning 101 and 201. It'll start at the beginning, gloss over bits and pieces, and then take us up to where we are. Ed came down as part of a meeting a couple of weeks ago and told us that, wow, you're really at the 2.1, so we can't just do a bike planning 101. We need to educate people even more. But the idea is that we really need, as part of this planning process, we need to involve our elected and appointed officials rather than just take a finished plan to them at the end and say, here, adopt this. We want them to be involved in the planning process, and this is a way to start that. So he'll give a 1-hour presentation, and then there'll be a question and answer where we can talk. There'll be all sorts of people at the table to help answer questions, and so it could just be an hour. If you're pressed for time, you could just come for the presentation and then leave. If you have time to stay and listen to the question and answer, that would be even better. So that is next Tuesday, October 22nd at 7 p.m. in the Civic Center. And if you have any questions, please let me know. If you could also just RSVP to me either way, if you can attend or not, because otherwise I'll keep bothering you, just to find out if you can. Does anyone have any questions?
Maybe one quick question is, do you have any idea the timeline of when some of the big public input sessions,
point.
how many months lead time do we have before we need to start rallying our neighbors and everybody and to spread the word to come to some big public input meetings?
Right. We were talking about the first public input meeting in January. The Regional Planning Commission is losing a planner, and they're having to shuffle some priorities, and it's possible that could be pushed back into February. It's possible it could still happen in January. We haven't discussed a revised timeline for that, but we also aren't close enough to know for sure that it really will be January. But January, if not January, then February. I'll pass these.
Any other questions from committee members about this? Okay, great. Thank you for the update. Next is an update on the Boneyard Creek Improvements Project from Brad.
Yeah, just to give you a quick update, as Rebecca mentioned, the resurfacing has occurred on Broadway Avenue between Water and University. They do have the bike lane pavement markings down, essentially the long striping. They don't have the symbols in yet. Those are still to come. And I'll also report, too, that Norfolk Southern is going to be replacing the signal crossings, the signal equipment, and we will be getting audible warnings there. So we should see an improvement in the safety. They will also be replacing the track, what they call the track surfacing, which are those rotted timbers that are terrible to ride over. So that's probably going to follow in a little bit. We wanted to try to get it done with the resurfacing, but Norfolk Southern wasn't quite prepared to do it, but we are close to an agreement with them on to get them to do that. So if you get a chance, head down to Broadway and check it out. They're still working on the creek portion of it, and we don't have any of the multi-use path in yet, but I would anticipate we'll probably see more on the construction of that this winter.
Any questions about that? Maybe we should roll right into the next related topic, which is the Main Street bike lanes, which is happening right there a few blocks from the Broadway part that's done.
Yes, they if you've been down to Main Street recently, they've got the old asphalt surface milled off. They're supposed to actually do the resurfacing Wednesday and Thursday night, so tomorrow night and then the night after. So hopefully they'll have the pavement surface. I haven't heard the date when they'll come in and do the striping, but I would anticipate it should be pretty shortly after. So it could be within the next week or two that the Main Street bike lanes, at least between Vine and Cedar, are done. They haven't started the resurfacing on the portion of Main Street from, trying to remember what street that is. I think it's from like Maple Street going east. They haven't started on that, but they're anticipating within the next week or two they'll start the resurfacing on that as well, and the bike lanes will go in with that. So it's moving along very quickly. And then on two, I'll kind of add updates on a couple more items that aren't necessarily on the list. October 24th, we're going to have a public meeting on the Florida and Philo traffic signal improvements project. We've done the bike lanes on Florida, the bike lanes in Philo. This is kind of the last piece at the intersection. The traffic signals are 35 years old, and they don't line up with what the current, vehicular lanes and bike lanes. We've done a road diet on both those roads, so the signal heads don't line up anymore. So that'll all be replaced. So if you're interested, it'll be between 6 and 7 p.m. over at Thomas Paine Elementary. It'll be in the library. Kind of an interesting thing, that BPAC might be interested in. We will be trying out this forward infrared-looking video detection system. We're not going to go with the traditional magnetic loop system in the pavement. This is actually a video detection system, but it uses infrared so that it doesn't have the problems of traditional video systems of foggy conditions or, heavy rains where it, can't pick up the vehicles or the bicycles in order to operate the signals. We've used this at one other location over on Cunningham Avenue, and kind of a joint effort with IDOT, and it's worked pretty well. But this will kind of be our first, major location in town that we'll be doing, and then we'll see how it works. It could be, a good potential solution to some of the problems that we have at intersections that Carrie mentioned earlier, where we're not, with a traditional magnetic loop system not picking up the bikes, and this is kind of a might be a good tool to fix that on future traffic signal upgrades. So, but on the pedestrian side of that too, we're going to include new bump outs, so there'll be actually shorter crossing distances for the pedestrians on Florida and Philo. And then I guess the one other thing I want to mention too, we've been working with Rebecca on trying to get the bike racks here replaced and upgraded. And I do have good news on it. We did get that approved. I'll probably be ordering the bike racks this week. But the bike racks that are kind of back out here, I don't know what you call them, the wavy loop, we'll replace that with a inverted U. There'll be one that goes in back here. And then kind of an exciting news out front, we're going to eliminate the one bike rack that's right up by the entrance, and looking at installing actually 5 bike racks on a new concrete pad that'll just be south of the fire station driveway. So we'll definitely be expanding the bike parking opportunities here at City Hall. So we'll hopefully get that wrapped up this fall before we get into winter.
Great. Rebecca?
Can you tell us about the Safe Routes to School signs? How we're doing on that?
Yeah, we're in the process of getting those installed. I think they've got all the signage up on Florida, Kench, and Fairview. The next step will be starting to put up some of the bike route signs for the bike routes we're signing as part of the Safe Routes to School project. The other thing we've got in, we finally did get the delivery of the bike racks for the school. I think we're putting in 54 bike racks at the different school locations around town. And the next school holiday, our crews will be over there installing those because the school district requested we not do that during normal school hours. So we are coming close to finishing up that project.
Great. Yeah, congratulations. Those are some big ones. Any other questions about any of those projects? Okay, then we can move on to new business tonight. Cynthia Hoyle went to a conference and got a bunch of great information and volunteered to come back here and give us a report on what she learned and some best practices from other communities. So with that, go ahead, Cynthia.
Let's open here. So I am going to show you some of the things I was in Boulder, Colorado, and I have a little bit of information about that. But I wanted to start out by saying one of the issues that we are dealing with is that infrastructure design for bicycles is rapidly evolving, and these are some of the most widely used design guidelines. And so for us to stay on top of that is a little bit of a challenge. And the conference that I attended was the Association of Pedestrian and Bicycle Professionals. Every other year they have a professional development seminar, and I had the privilege of moderating and presenting at one of the sessions. But the day before it started, we had options for mobile tours. So on September 9th in the morning, I went on a tour, and this was the little description of what I was going to do, highlights of what I was going to see. I don't remember seeing the community cycle shop. I think perhaps we spent so much time asking questions and looking at things that we didn't quite get there. And that Monday morning was right before the rain started. I think I was that morning were the only tours that didn't get rained on, and of course it went from just rain to disaster there after that. So some of what I'm going to show you today was undoubtedly underwater, and some of it may have been washed away. But they're working on fixing it. The reason why I was interested in particular in this conference is that Boulder is a platinum bicycle-friendly community, and they have not been working on this that much longer than us, maybe 10 years ahead of us in their efforts. So it's a community that we can look at. It's a college community, and we can look at what they have done and take lessons from that. I included a link to a video here on Street Films. They do a lot of great films, and they had one on Boulder Goes Platinum, and I thought that was an interesting view of some of the things that we looked at. So they have a lot of information on their website if you're curious. I pulled a few things, and I've got some handouts here that I can show you, but all of this is also online. They have a Safe Streets Boulder report and the Transportation Master Plan, and within the Transportation Master Plan they have a complete streets section that integrates with their sustainability efforts. It's very nicely integrated, but I want to just give you a few of these little factoids that 95% of their arterials accommodate bicyclists, and that they bike to work at 20 times the national average. I included some pedestrian statistics here as well. People walk to work at 3 times the national average. And then they had some crash data. They track crashes very carefully, and then they have a number of strategies and recommendations in their reports for how to improve it. But their conclusion was that given the high rate of walking and biking, their crash rates were pretty low overall. Only 6% involved bicyclists, 1.8 involved pedestrians, and 0.2 involved skateboarders. They had the usual, as most places do, that crosswalks are common locations for crashes, and that drivers are cited 3 times more often than pedestrians, and 1.8 times more percentage, 1.8% more, I should say, than cyclists. It was interesting that the bike collisions spike in August and September. I think they have the same issues we do when students come back to school. You have a whole new generation of people who have to learn how to get around. But their pedestrian collisions spike in January, February, and March, which is something that we may want to consider asking to look at. I think it would be helpful for our group to look at bike crashes, pedestrian crashes, and motorist crashes, and then, if possible, look at the data on who was cited as at fault. As we look at the enforcement programs that the community has been undertaking, are we focusing our resources on the right group of people in terms of the crashes on our roadways? The journey to work by bike shows you a graph there of their rates compared to Denver and the nation. And so clearly their efforts to provide infrastructure, once again, if you build it, they will come. And it's not like Boulder has great weather. They get more snow than we do. So, but they have 58 miles of paved multi-use paths and 78 underpasses. And a lot of that was built in it's part of their Greenways program. It's a stormwater management, which actually worked very well, by the way. In 1976, when they had a flood that wasn't as big as this one, they had, I believe, 176 people killed, and this time they had less than 10, I think, based on the last reports that I saw. So all of that effort did help. So they have 4 miles of climbing bike lanes, not something that we'll ever need here, and 10 miles of paved shoulders, which are, I think, very helpful, although I say I misspelled shoulders, and 43 miles of bike routes, and 10 miles of soft surface trails. One of the things that I wanted to tell you all about, which I think is something we may want to look at, doing a similar program here, is they call it the Living Laboratory. And what they do is put in bike facilities to see if they work right, and they have a place on their website where bicyclists can give them feedback on the infrastructure over the time period that they have it in place. And these are some of the current demonstration projects, and I have pictures of some of them. I took over 150 pictures, so obviously you're not going to get to see all the pictures I took. But they did a variety of things: buffered bike lanes and buffered or protected cycle tracks, back in angle parking with a bike lane, buffered bike lanes of different kinds, a bike boulevard, a bike box, advisory bike lane. And interestingly, they were going to try a program with their electric assist bikes, because when you have hills, having an electric assist bike is a great idea. And they are now allowed on the on-road infrastructure, the bike lanes, but they're not allowed on the off-road infrastructure. So they wanted to see whether that makes a difference in terms of crash rates, because they have such an extensive system of off-road infrastructure, that does limit people who are using electric assist bikes. So here's what it looked like the morning that we took off. We actually got on our bikes right behind the hotel we were in and took off. The system is quite extensive. And these are these are teaser shots of the beautiful routing that we had, and then some of the amazing infrastructure that we saw that I will talk about further. This is just one of the many underpasses that they have built. This intersection was very interesting to me because it's close to campus, and I think we were there around the time the students were headed to class, much like before a 9 o'clock class here. They had a lot of crashes at this location, and they did a major overhaul, and they used these pork chop islands, pedestrian refuge islands, extensively at high volume intersections. And then they put in a colored bike lane and some other things, and you'll see from the pictures how this kind of all fit together. And note that they have a sign there. It says left turn yield to pedestrian. And I know this morning we had a crash with a pedestrian at Lincoln and Springfield, I think, as a left-turning vehicle. I don't know anything more than that, but that's a frequent location that people are looking other places when they're driving, and pedestrians and cyclists and crosswalks are not seen. This is an indication of how many students, as we were standing there, just dozens and dozens of them were bicycling to class using the multi-use path. There were some on the road, and there are bike lanes, but not nearly as many, and I didn't include pictures because I could only include so many pictures here. They also have these signals set up so that bicyclists know that they can use that to cross the street, but that also reminding them to yield to pedestrians. This is a multi-use path that they installed along a roadway that they redesigned. And Colorado's part of the Great West, where they built roads wide enough to land small aircraft on when they first started building them. So they have lots of roadway to work with. So they created a boulevard here. They put in a center island, reduced the number of lanes, and added multi-use path on the side. And a lot of people use that for transportation purposes. These are some of the underpasses, and as I said, they also served for stormwater management. And I don't know, if I'd had the time, I would have gone and looked to see which ones were most severely impacted. But a number of these locations were places that were underwater, where the water was running over the roadway, even with this infrastructure they had installed. And some of the tunnels, the lower one, you can't see very well. It's hard to take a picture in a tunnel during the daytime. But it had art. They had commissioned local artists to put art in there, and they do have lights. They said their tunnels have to be short enough that you can see through the other side. They have to be well lit, etc. This project was very impressive. It was a $5 or $6 million project, and it involved multiple funding sources and multiple entities, including the university's Architecture Review Board, which some of us have dealt with and know that that really adds special joy to your project. And this was a location that they had. It's like the major entrance to the university, and the highest passenger count in the community was at this location, and pedestrians had been hit and killed here trying to cross this road. So they built this, and I took a lot of pictures, but I'm going to try and show you major ones. What they did is they set it up so that pedestrians and bicyclists can get across the road, either going under or using, like for example, this fellow right here. This is an overpass that is bikes and peds only. And so they have choices about how they can move around. And the other little element thrown in there was that building is an elementary school. So you're adding in all of that traffic to this location. So it was a multi-year, entity project, but it was sensationally well done. I was very impressed with it. The other thing that they did is, like I said, you have choices. You can take this and circle around that way if you don't want to use the other underpass. And then I wanted to show you that they put in the bike ramp, so that if you wanted to walk up the stairs with your bike, this is designed for you to be able to push your bike beside you on the stairway. And many places in Europe do this for their transit entrances, underground entrances. And this is a view looking out from there toward the university, so you can see how that all fit together. And it was an amazing project. These are some of the living lab locations that we saw. This one is the back-end parking bike lane design, and I thought that this is a really brilliant way to do that, because people are always very resistant to the idea of back-in parking, but once they use it, then they wonder why we ever started doing it the other way. My personal theory is that it's because we started parking with horses and wagons, and you don't back them into parking spaces, because you had to tie them up to the hitching post. And we never changed it once we moved to motorized vehicles. Then they had two different kinds of buffered bike lanes. This one was interesting. Maybe it was a little bit lighter on my screen. That the parking spaces are striped so that there's essentially a buffer created here, in addition to the buffer on the left. They also had one that didn't include this, that just had the buffer on this side and then a wide space between the curb and the buffer. And they were going to see how those worked. And then this was a road. Over here are dorms. These are university dorms. And a lot of the students brought cars. When I asked about that, they said they wanted to have their vehicles to go up into the mountains and do things. And I thought, well, yeah, I guess that's a good reason to bring your car to campus. But this was a 6-lane arterial, which was significantly overbuilt for the traffic counts, and so they took one entire lane out and they created a buffered bike lane. But they also had a multi-use path along the side, and most of the bicyclists I saw were actually using the multi-use path. but this was one of their living laboratory projects as well. Then this was a left and right buffered bike lane, and I thought this one was very nicely done. And I didn't put in the pictures because I didn't want to take up the time, but they also, we had a special design because they have an intersection at the other end of it, and so they had a raised crosswalk as a way to transition from the buffered bike lane to the bicyclists and the vehicles going through. But I also took a picture. It was so new that they still had the markings. So it's a 2.9 foot buffer and then the 4 foot bike lane. And I think are these stripes usually 4 inches? Is that?
Typically 6 inches on the inside.
Okay.
4 is the parking lane, so the parking stripe.
They looked about the same width to me, but I could be wrong. But, you know, roughly adding it up, it looked like it was about 10 feet of space. They have a lot of space to work with there because their roads are so wide, which is not something that we always have here. This is a contraflow bike lane that leads to a bike path, and this was also part of their living laboratory. That's my tour group you can see there, and it led down to, and you can see there's a bus stop on the side. A bus came by, had a bike on the front. I had to take a picture of that too. On the direction going with the traffic, they just had sharrows, and this was sort of a neighborhood street. As you can see over here, there's an arterial street, and then there's an off-road multi-use path down here that it's transitioning to. You can see there. And they also had bike parking at bus stops, which is interesting. So someone had chained their bike up there, even with their helmet. Then downtown Boulder used a lot of different designs, and this one included a contraflow lane and a number of other designs, the landscaped island in the middle, and it was very, very nicely done. So that was all I was going to take the time to show you tonight, but I am happy to answer any questions, and I've got a little bit of information with me, but there's also a lot of information online.
Great. What questions does anyone have for Cynthia?
I had a question about how they evaluate the living laboratories. Did they talk at all about how they solicit feedback and how successful they are in actually getting feedback from people?
It's possible that they discussed that to some degree, and I don't remember if, I wonder if I go back, if the sign had, this is a show, I can't, there we are. So it's got the website and a phone number here as well, and I'm sure they put stuff on their website as well. One of the other things that I went to a session on winter maintenance and snow removal, and that was a really fascinating discussion, and at some point later in the year I'd be happy to share information about how they handle that in places that get snow. Boulder gets enough snow that they have a dedicated budget for it. But they don't have snow on the ground continuously like some of the people who presented from Canada. And I recently posted a video on Facebook of a film that was made. They had the first ever international conference, I believe they call it, for winter cycling last year in Finland, and this year it's going to be in Canada. And I brought a cart along. I would love to go. I can't really justify going, but it was really very interesting. So we could probably look on their website and see if they do additional media blitzes to solicit input. But I'm assuming they do counts, they look at crash data, and then they look at public feedback as part of their assessment. But I'm sure they have a process that they go through for that, because it was a pretty well organized program. I think they do have a bike share program. They have the Gold Boulder program, and so they have car share, and they have what they call an eco pass. And even at the airport where I caught the shuttle bus up from Denver to Boulder, the students had an eco pass, just showed their pass and got on, so they had access to regional transit as well as local transit using that. And so it was pretty well integrated. I didn't see the bike share program, but it started raining Monday night, and I didn't go out a whole lot and wander around after that. So I'm absolutely not sure, but I suspect they do. Aspen, Colorado has a bike share program. When I was there this summer, that one really surprised me. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They are. It's going very well in terms of membership. Yeah, and use. People like. Yeah, I think initially the process of figuring out how to your redistribution system takes some time. I used the bike share program when I was in D.C. At the end, I got to be in D.C. for the government shutdown, so my September trips included 2 disasters. But I borrowed a bike share bike and used their off-road path along the river there. And there were a lot of people out using that path. It was impressive, and the bike share program was a great opportunity to go do that. They had a rack right behind our hotel, and we were in Virginia. We weren't in actually in D.C. So they've spread it into the region. Yes.
Great.
Could the
I was very curious about that. I wondered if darkness had anything to do with it, and I'm sure the report says, because it's a pretty extensive report, and I didn't go through the pedestrian data very carefully, but yeah, I was curious about that as well. I found that to be, yeah.
You're thinking, Audrey, of like if the sidewalks aren't shoveled at all, that pedestrians end up just walking in the street. Yeah.
But they have a snow removal. They remove the snow on all their multi-use paths. So it'd probably be interesting to look at where those things occurred. And they have a snow removal ordinance. It was one of the ones I looked at when we were, because I've been on a campaign since I moved here in 2001 for us to require snow removal. And they had a program I thought we could use here called Ice Busters. That's volunteers who help people who qualify for assistance in snow removal. So they take that pretty seriously. But yeah, I was curious, and it would be something to look into further.
Any other questions?
Okay. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much. And I think some of these treatments will come up at next Tuesday night's meeting. I really encourage people, if you're free, to come to that 7 o'clock meeting at the Civic Center next Tuesday, because I think in Ed Bersati's presentation to City Council and all of us, there really will be some talk of some of these other treatments that other college towns like Boulder are starting to use, and which of them are applicable here or make sense or solve some of the unique problems we have here in Champaign-Urbana. So it's great to see some of those pictures and examples. And
I have an amateur question,
Yeah.
kind of based on some of the things that she showed. How are we making it easier for our citizens to make comments? Like, they have that phone number there. Like, do we have a tweet that people can hashtag and we can get comments on problems that people are having, or
Rebecca?
Actually, so we have a marketing director. She's in the Department of Community Development Services, Natalie Kenny Marquez, and she handles most of the city's social media, Facebooking and tweeting and so on. And she actually forwarded me a tweet, I think it was over the weekend. Someone wanted to know how they could, I can't quite remember, it's at the edge of my memory. It had to do with if they were to light and they couldn't trigger it, what could they do? And they gave the specific light location. It was in Urbana. She forwarded that to me, and so I then explained to her, and she then tweeted it back out. So we don't have a specific bicycle or pedestrian social media presence, but we do have people talking about it on social media. And she does put information out there about what we're doing in terms of bicycles and pedestrians, and so people are aware, the people that pay attention to those things are aware that that's one place you can ask a question.
Great. Any other questions or comments on this? Okay, next on our agenda, we always have announcement time. I wonder if anybody has any other announcements of events coming up.
I do.
Amelia?
Next week, a week from tomorrow, which is Wednesday, October 23rd, I am working with Champaign County Bikes to organize a giant bicycle census count on campus. We're trying to estimate exactly how many bikes we have on campus, because it's a number we're all very curious about. So what we're doing is we're organizing as many volunteers as we can possibly wrangle up. Please volunteer if you're free at 10 a.m. next Wednesday to go around, and we'll assign people specific quadrants of the campus, and from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. they'll be asked to count every parked bicycle they see. And we're working with the GIS group, which is a student a registered student organization that does GIS consulting, and they're helping us figure out how to map all of this data after we've collected it, so that we can continue to use it and compare, you know, how many bikes are parked on parking versus off parking, how many of the bikes parked on trees and railings are actually near bike parking versus not. What buildings are lacking bike parking, that sort of thing. So it has some very specific applications, but also generally knowing how many bikes on campus will go a long way to help us as we try to fundraise and also determine what services we need to expand and provide. So please help us spread the word, and if you can volunteer, I would appreciate it.
Great.
Thanks.
Yeah. That is next Wednesday, the 23rd, from 10 to 11 a.m. Okay, great. What else? Cynthia?
Yeah, this Saturday there will be a Traffic Skills 101 class here in Urbana. If anybody is interested in attending, it is a full-day class, and it is the precursor to becoming a league cycling instructor. So if you take this class and successfully complete it, then you can go on. Rebecca has done that, and we have 2 other people in Urbana who are now certified league cycling instructors, and then we have one, Tim Marty, who's a professor at the university, who's in Monticello, who is an LCI. But having more of us would be helpful. For example, this week, as part of the Splash After School Bike program, we're doing a bike rodeo with the students. And then the 23rd is our last class, and we'll be doing a bike ride. If anybody would like to volunteer to help with any of those, we'd be delighted to have you come and help us. It's after school, and we have about 12 very enthusiastic middle school students. It's been a lot of fun. We did a melon drop off of the roof. We took 2 honeydew melons. We drew a happy face and a sad face, and the happy face melon went in a helmet. And the superintendent happened by, so we actually had him on top of the gymnasium helping drop it. And then the week after, we had Neutral Cycle, it's a local bike shop. They came in and did bike maintenance with the kids, and they really enjoyed that a lot. It was very hands-on and interactive. This last week, we did Rules of the Road and night visibility. That was a little harder to make interactive, but I think they got the basic information. So piece by piece, small step by small step, we try and bring more education into the community. But I feel like this might serve as a model for other schools and maybe the Park District to move forward. And the more instructors we have in the community, the better we can do these things.
That's great. So the LCI training is this
The Traffic
Saturday.
Skills 101 is this
The
Saturday.
Traffic Skills 101, okay. The
Yes,
precursor
if you're
to
interested,
LCI.
just send me an email.
Okay, perfect. Any other announcements? Okay, great. Then the very last thing on our agenda is just to remind people about the next meeting. I know we will skip November, but our next meeting will be December 17th, which is the 3rd Tuesday of December. Okay.
I can report on the bike count.
I would like for us to talk again about the program for becoming a pedestrian-friendly community. And I know the initial issue was trying to do a pedestrian master plan, and we didn't have the database for it, and I know Kuwat's now has a grant to do that, so that's something I'd like for us to take a look at. I think it's really important for us to look at pedestrian issues in our community because more people are walking to work in Urbana than bicycling. I think we should encourage more bicyclists, but we need to take a look at the needs of our pedestrians as well.
Yeah. And any month that you all feel ready with the kind of the pedestrian planning or the ADA ramp audit or any of those kind of pedestrian related projects at whatever point they're ready, would be great to have an update on.
It would be interesting to see Ben Leroy and Champaign present on their walkability study they're doing right now, since they're doing a pedestrian plan for Champaign. That might be very interesting to learn more about and see what we can borrow. And
Yeah. Is that a City of Champaign initiative?
yeah, sorry,
Okay.
he's a new planner in the city of
Okay.
Champaign.
CU Public Health District provided grant funding to do that.
Okay. That'd be cool if they're willing to come, just kind of knowledge sharing and starting to make sure our plans sort of align with their plans. And
I think too, Brad, it might be interesting to have a presentation on the bike infrastructure and maybe some pictures of the infrastructure, because not everybody here rides bikes for transportation, so they may not have used the new infrastructure. So I think it might be interesting to have a look at some of it at some point.
Any other suggestions? Okay, great. Well, you can always reach out to Brad or Rebecca with ideas as well. But okay, I think unless there's any other announcements, that brings us to the end of tonight's agenda. Anything final before we adjourn? Okay, thank you all very much. Then I will declare this meeting adjourned. Have a good evening.
Thank you.